whenever there's no knowledge of how many species of giant squids there are in the world. So we're using a mixture of DNA research with collaborators to try and find out how many species there are, and also measurements off the specimens to try and see if there's any easy way to tell if this animal differs from the ones in Japan, in the North Atlantic, in the southern hemisphere. It's like a little shark jaw on a little skinny base. So if I can find one, I'll get Jasper to zoom in. So Jasper, there's one here. Is that too little for you? Is that all right? So you can see there's little sharp teeth around the edge of the sucker, and that means that every sucker on along the arms of these animals can act like a little shark's jaw grabbing onto something when they... Sorry, did I throw it away too soon? When they grab their food. So the skin comes off very easily on a giant squid. This is the maroon coloured skin. So the reason it's red-brown is that in very low light levels, red becomes black, so it looks pitch black. And at that depth, when you're deep enough, you don't need to have black skin. Red's enough because the light's so low that they look the same. And so there's a possibility that giant squid are like the jumbo squids. Jumbo squids in Baja, California can flash from white to red. The whole body goes white, red in pulses. So the simplicity of this skin, you can see that it's just red-brown. It's got a little bit of density in other spots. If you come down here, Jasper, you can sometimes see the little spots that are the individual pigment sacs, but there's no evidence of the muscle bits that can be raised. So they're probably smooth-skinned, and they can probably turn that red skin on and off, and that's probably the limit of their colour change. But that's not surprising considering it's a kilometre down, it's pitch black, you don't do a lot of visual displays. We're going to work on the beak. Squid and octopus and cuttlefish all evolved in a very strange way. Their nearest relatives are snails and clams and mussels, so you can think of them as a super snail, where they've got their foot's turned into 8 or 10 limbs around their mouth. They're like super lips. And then they've got a brain that developed around their food tube, their esophagus, so it's a donut-shaped brain that the food tube goes through the middle of. Now, if you tried to eat something big through that big brain, you'd get a splitting headache. So what they've done is they've developed a front end that's kind of like a garbage disposal unit. It's got two halves of a beak, like the beak of a giant parrot, and then behind that is a tongue covered in sharp teeth. So those sharp teeth are how they puree their food up. So you can see the tips of the two beaks here. They're very sharp and very strong. They could probably cut through our fingers in about 2 seconds if it was alive. So what we're going to do is get some dissecting gear and just tease out those two halves of the beaks and show you the beaks halves out of there. So it's a very complicated arrangement to chew the food into a tiny puree so they can pass it through the middle of their brain without getting ice cream headache. Our preparators at the museum have put together, and it just shows those two beaks in place and the little sharp-toothed tongue behind it, the radula. So we'll be dissecting out the radula, that tongue, and these two beak halves so that we can look at the fine structure of the teeth, the shape of the beaks, and see if there's anything that helps separate the possibly different species. So this is the upper beak. So this piece sits in here like this, and then that becomes the cutting edges. We're not getting this right. It cuts along the cutting edge inside there, so it's very good at tearing flesh off the things they eat. And later when we turn it over and open up the stomach contents, we'll be looking for the sorts of food remains. So this is the radula, or the toothed tongue. It's got little sharp teeth on it that you can feel. So again, are you able to see that? So again, there's rows of 7 teeth across and probably 100 rows long, and they use it like a little conveyor belt covered in sharp teeth to take those little chunks of meat and puree them into sort of even smaller pieces so then they can swallow that. It's in the skin that we find evidence of mating behaviour. This is preliminary because when we turn it over and open it, we're expecting it to be female because the bigger ones are female in giant squids. And giant squids have very strange mating behaviour. The male has a 1.5 metre long penis that it uses like a nail gun. They can insert little cords of sperm into the skin of the female's arms and sometimes around the head, and she stores them in her skin until she's ready to lay her eggs. So she may, for months, have that sperm buried in under the skin, and then when she's ready to lay her eggs, she uses that sperm somehow to fertilise millions of tiny little eggs and blow this big jelly bubble, which then floats mid-water with the juveniles in. So we're going to look through the skin to see if there's any what looks like little white worms. There's evidence that they're quite cannibalistic, so that the females probably eat the males, or they may just eat each other in general if they bump into each other, which might be why that system's developed for putting the sperm quickly in the female's arms and swimming away quickly, because it's probably a very dangerous thing for the smaller males to be hanging around too long. It can be like some of the spiders or the praying mantises where the male gets eaten when they're trying to mate and fertilise the female's eggs. This is the eye, and so it's deflated. It's actually lost the lens, which is in the middle. The lens is about the size of a golf ball, and this is the deflated eye orbit itself, and then it sits in a broader socket that has a big sort of lid around the outside. So it's the biggest, it and the colossal squid have the biggest eyes in the world, bigger even than blue whale eyes. You know, the blue whale skeleton that's out there is huge, but its eye is actually smaller than the giant squid and the colossal squid. The main propulsion for squid, octopus and cuttlefish is jet propulsion, and that's where this large muscular tube squeezes and it forces water at high pressure through a funnel. So this is the funnel or the siphon. It's like a giant jet propulsion. So those jet planes that can drive around with jet propulsion, these are using this to swim along. So they're jetting along using jets of water. And in some of the flying squid, it's using a jet of water to get in the air and then glide through the air and land in the sea again. So this was the revolution that allowed a lot of these animals to get off the seafloor and up swimming around in the water column. So it's a variation on some snails and clams. You see a little tube that they suck water into their gills. This has sort of been souped up to super speeds and super sensitivity, and they can turn the angles. So they can turn it this way and it'll make them jet along this way. They'll turn it this way and they can jet along this way. So that's the funnel or the siphon. Now these are the gills. So we can show this one easier. And they have lots of little leaves that maximise the surface area for them to suck oxygen out of the seawater. So there's a left and a right gill, and internally there is a heart on the top of each gill and then a heart in the middle of the body. So they have 3 hearts. One of the problems with their blood pigments, it's based on copper, so it's blue, compared with ours that's based on iron, which is red. So when something rusts, you see red. That's because of the iron oxide. In our blood is red because of the iron in the blood pigment. In these animals, it's copper-based, so it's a pale blue, runny blood, and it's not very good at taking up oxygen. So they have to compensate by pumping so much more of this runny blood, so much faster, to be able to sort of stay fast, efficient animals. So the way they've done it is putting a muscular heart on the top of each gill, and we'll peel off this membrane in a minute and show you inside, and then one central heart in the middle. So in our heart we have a left and right section. I can't remember which is which, but one does the lung circuit and the other one takes the oxygenated blood right around the body. In these, the central heart's the body one, and the one on each gill is the one that keeps it going through the gills to get the oxygen.